Are long distance relationships becoming more common? Let's discuss it in this video. I think that the really interesting thing is long distance relationships in the past, if you think about it, were ultra common. Before we had, cars and airplanes and everybody traveled on horse and buggy or walked it, you didn't necessarily work close to your home. You may have worked 100 miles, 200 miles from your home, a few hundred kilometers from your home. It would be, in those days, impossible for you to travel home to your family every day. Maybe you could travel home on the weekends, maybe once a month, but going home every day to a loving family and the stereotypical, walking in the door, hug your wife, sit down to dinner and talk to the kids wasn't possible. Wasn't possible back then. Only the very rich owned horses. The rest of us, we were walking it. Only because, the modern automobile and airplanes and ships and everything else, is it possible for people to travel home every day. And quite often, people would go off to war, they would go off to work in the mines, they would go to work on the farms, and they may be gone for months and months and months without seeing their family. It was impossible for them to travel home. And maybe a lot of them that went out on the ships and went out to war didn't come home. They left their families forever. Kind of a scary thought, really, how things were, hundreds of years ago. Then, of course, in the 1900s, technology changed everything. Cars became affordable for everybody. Everybody could commute. Like it or not, people can drive to work and drive home. They could catch the train to work and they catch the train home. They can come home to their families every day. Yes, it causes an absolute nightmare first thing in the morning and when you get off work in the afternoon. But in the 1900s, the commute appeared. And you had this model where you come home to your families every day. You drive out to work, you do your thing, and you come home every day. And it became the accepted norm. Working away from home was no longer normal. Very few people at that point, unless they had a job where they had to work away from home, such as a pilot or they're working on the boats or whatever, very few people did not come home every single day. Most people came home every single day, and we had this kind of stereotypical template of, walking in the door, hugging your wife, and sitting at dinner and talking to the kids and all that kind of stuff. We had that kind of the model built into us through the 1960s and through the 1970s, and definitely into the 1980s. We had that kind of that model built into us. Then technology pushes things further. The internet showed up and reared its ugly head. And the internet turned us into a global workforce. As we all know from COVID, you can work from home. I know that's not becoming, as popular as it was because certain people want us all back in the office, not mentioning any names, but you can work from home. You can communicate digitally. You don't have to come home to your family every day because of the internet. If you live hundreds of miles from your family, you can just come home on the weekends. If you live on the other side of the planet from your family, like I do, you can come home every few months. It has turned us into a global economy. Now, you live where your job is. And where your job is isn't necessarily where your family are. And it has become more and more acceptable to not come home to a family every day and to come home to your family maybe once every few months. It's very strange to a lot of us because in the past, this would only happen if you're working on the oil rigs or you're working, far, far away and you could only come home once in a while. Now it's happening out of necessity because people are finding the good, well paid jobs far away from home. And they're saying, okay, I'll accept that because modern communications, modern technology is allowing me to stay in touch with my family, even when my family can be, thousands and thousands of miles away. That wasn't possible in the 1980s. In the 1980s, when it was like, expensive for a long distance phone call. Long distance phone calls in the 1980s completely sucked. Let's be honest, they completely sucked. It was this echo on the line whenever you called anybody on the satellite phone. And it was very, very expensive. Even cell phone calls were local, they were very, very expensive. Today, in this digital economy, with this connected world where everything is connected these days, let's face it, everything is connected these days, it is possible to have a long distance relationship. That has turned us into a global economy now. You don't have to work where you live, and you don't have to live where you work. You can come home every few months and see your family. If you have better opportunities in another country, you can do that. And we're kind of seeing this with some of the nomad visas and some of the other immigration initiatives that are happening. And I believe that we're going to see more and more of a global economy as we move forward, and people are going to be working from everywhere and anywhere. Wherever they can work from, they're going to be working from. And that is going to make things swing the other way. I believe in the future, what we'll see is we'll see a lot more remote workers, and people will now be working from home and they'll be back with their family. So the pendulum would have just completely swung the other way. Right now, we're going through this period of a lot of long distance relationships. People are going where the work is, and where the work is isn't necessarily where your family is. And I believe over time, as remote work becomes more and more acceptable, as some of these CEOs begin to realize that maybe keeping the office open isn't a good economic, doesn't make good economic sense, the pendulum will swing the other way. And what we'll see is we'll see more and more and more people working from home because it's far more efficient. It gives you a far better work life balance, and there'll be less long distance relationships. That being said, long distance relationships are never going away, but they have increased a heck of a lot. And yeah, I think that long distance relationships are they're definitely going to be here forever. That's a fact of life. Everybody at some point is going to be in a long distance relationship, but I think that right now we're at the kind of the peak of the LDR spectrum, and it's going to sort of there'll be less and less in the coming years.